I've always been a vivid dreamer. For better or worse, my nights are filled with intense, movie-like visions, complete with complex characters and intricate plots. Some people claim they never dream, or if they do, they can't remember. But for me, dreams are like entire worlds. I dive into, sometimes living entire lifetimes in the span of one night. It can be fun, until the nightmares come. There was one time I dreamt my mother's head morphed into an alligator's, and she chased me around the room, snarling that she wanted to eat my insides. Waking up, drenched in sweat, I couldn't look at her the same for a week. The terror lingered. Most of the time, though, I loved dreaming. As a writer, dreams were like fuel for my imagination. My subconscious took me to places my waking mind could never reach. If my daytime thoughts were a carriage, my dreams were a starship, flying far beyond what seemed possible. But everything changed a year after my father died. We had been driving together that day just like any other. I still remember the laughter, the way the road stretched out in front of us. Then there was the blinding flash of headlights, the metallic screech of the crash, and suddenly we were upside down. I spent one night in the hospital. My father didn't wake up at all. Afterward, I adjusted. Or at least I thought I had. I had good days and bad days. And naturally, I dreamt about him probably more than was healthy. I wish those dreams were of happier memories, but they weren't. In my dreams, I always knew he was dead. That's what made them so unsettling. I'd see him, talk to him, but always with the gnawing knowledge that he was gone. It wasn't like I thought he was a ghost, and I didn't realize I was dreaming either. It was as if my mind accepted both truths at once. He was dead, and yet he was standing right in front of me. Both impossible and yet undeniably real. One dream in particular haunts me still. I was in the passenger seat of a car. My father was driving. Ominous, I know. But at the time, it didn't occur to me. I glanced over at him, and the first thought that sprang to mind was, "Dad, you're dead. You really shouldn't be driving." I said it out loud, almost like I was testing the waters. He didn't react, so I stayed quiet. I didn't want to upset him, but then he turned to me slowly and looked at me in a way that chilled my blood. There was no recognition in his eyes, no warmth, no anger, no sadness, just nothing. When he spoke, his voice was hollow, drained of life. "You shouldn't be here." I felt my throat tighten. Why shouldn't? But, Dad, you're the one who shouldn't be here. His face remained blank, and then, in that same monotone voice, he said, "You have to wake up. Now." The world tilted. My vision blurred, and I shot up in bed, heart pounding like a jackhammer. The room was dark and silent, but something had yanked me awake. A noise, a sharp, metallic sound. My eyes darted around, adjusting to the darkness, searching for its source. Nothing. I live with cats, so I figured one of them must have knocked something over. But even after turning on the lights and scouring the hallway, I found nothing out of place. I glanced at the clock. It was midnight. Sleep didn't come easily after that. The sound, it echoed in my head, over and over again. It wasn't my father's voice or the strange dream that kept me awake. It was that sound, clear and distinct, like a pair of shears, snipping. The next day at work was a blur. I downed twice my usual amount of coffee, but still couldn't keep my eyes open. I must have looked awful. 2 bloodshot eyes, disheveled hair, wrinkled shirt, but my coworkers didn't comment. A year after my father's death, people were still forgiving when I had my off days. That evening, I was hanging out with my roommate, John. We were just having a few beers and playing video games when I asked him, "Hey, did you hear anything weird last night?" John shrugged, focusing on the screen. "Weird how? Like a snipping sound?" He paused the game, turning to look at me. "Yeah, I woke up around midnight. I couldn't tell what it was, though. I thought it was one of the cats." My stomach dropped. "Did it sound like shears?" He blinked, then nodded slowly. "Now that you mention it, yeah, it kinda did." Before I could react, John grinned. "Probably just the cats, man. They're always knocking stuff over." I tried to laugh it off, but the chill in my spine lingered long after the conversation ended. That night, I dreamt again, but it wasn't of my father. I recognized the setting immediately: my house. It was nighttime. Everything was eerily quiet, save for the ticking of a clock. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I was just watching. Then, from the kitchen, I heard a metallic jostling sound. Someone was trying to open the back door. My pulse quickened, and I willed myself to move, but I remained frozen, an observer in my own home. The door creaked open. What stepped through still makes my skin crawl. The creature was almost human, its body twisted and grotesque, covered in deep cuts and scars. It had no nose, no eyelids, no ears, and in its hands it clutched two massive rusted shears. It snipped the air with them as it moved, each snip deafening in the silence. I watched helplessly as it stalked through the house, those shears slicing the air with every step, each one coming closer and closer to my room. As I pulled her into my arms, we spent the evening together, but reality caught up fast. We both had early mornings ahead, so I didn't stay the night. I went home, exhausted, and collapsed into bed. That's when the smell hit me musk. I stirred, the scent lingering in the air like an unshakable presence. My eyes were heavy from 2 nights of broken sleep, and I nearly drifted off again, but something was wrong. It wasn't a sound that jolted me awake this time, it was the stench. The smell of an unwashed dog filled the room, scratching at my nose, gnawing at my awareness. I opened my eyes and screamed. The monster was standing right over me, grinning with that slit-mouthed smile, lidless, bloodshot eyes drilling into mine. Its whole form radiated malice. It was here, in my room, to kill me. I screamed louder than I ever thought possible, my throat tearing raw as I begged for anyone to save me. But something deep inside told me I wouldn't be heard. I scrambled to move, but pain seared through my wrists, stabbing into my brain like a firebrand. I snapped my gaze to my wrists. My arms were stretched wide, pinned to the headboard by a pair of long, rusty shears. I tried to pull free, but even the slightest twitch unleashed waves of agony through every nerve. Agony. This has to be a dream, I told myself. It must be. This thing couldn't exist. If it did, then what was the point of anything? What was the point of ever feeling safe, of feeling happy? But the creature wasn't done. Though its shears were already embedded in my wrists, somehow it materialized 2 more. The monster twitched and snipped the air, its grotesque smile growing wider, eyes lingering on my bloodied arms, relishing the sight. Its lips peeled back further, revealing crooked, yellow teeth and a blood-red tongue. I pleaded, begged, "Let me go." But my words were useless, if anything. My desperation amused it. The thing leaned in closer, the wet dog stench filling my senses, suffocating me as its toothy grin hung above me. Its feet remained planted on the floor, yet its grotesque form stretched impossibly far over me. It inhaled deeply through the slits where a nose once was, drinking in my terror. Then it stepped back, and for a fleeting second, relief fluttered in my chest. But the creature fell to its knees at the foot of the bed. Slowly, it raised the shears in its left hand to its face, licking the blades with its slithering tongue. I kicked as hard as I could, trying to dislodge its icy grip on my ankle, but it didn't flinch. Its grip tightened, nearly crushing my bones. I felt the shears sink deeper with every struggle, the pain nearly blinding me. Then the cutting began. The monster hacked away, mercilessly, until with one final pull my foot came off. My scream echoed through the room as the thing raised my severed foot into the air like a twisted trophy. My vision blurred, darkness creeping in from the edges as blood loss turned the world cold. I was slipping away, but even as the cold took over, I couldn't look away from the thing. Its jaw dropped open, shears clattering to the floor as it stuffed my foot into its gaping mouth. I could hear the crunch of bones as it devoured the last of me. And then, everything went black. I woke up screaming, thrashing so wildly that 2 nurses had to restrain me before I tore out my 4. It took several minutes to realize I was in a hospital bed. My heart was still pounding when the doctor came in. "Do you remember what happened?" she asked, her voice measured. I recounted the nightmare, the creature, the attack, but I could tell from her expression that she didn't believe a word. "How did I get here? Is it still in my house?" I demanded. The doctor gently checked my 4 and the bandages on my wrists. "You've been in an accident," she said softly. "You were hit by a truck. Your car rolled off the road. You've been unconscious for 3 days." An accident. Of course. That made sense. More sense than a scissor-wielding creature stealing my foot. "I don't remember driving," I said. "We had to make a difficult decision," she added, her eyes flicking down to my feet. I pulled the sheet back, and my stomach dropped. My right leg was gone. Bandages covered the stump where my foot used to be. I barely had time to process the sight before my mother and sister rushed in, sobbing and clinging to me. We embraced for what felt like forever, none of us ready to let go. "It's okay," I whispered, trying to soothe them. "I'll get through this. We'll get through this." More tears, more hugs. But my sister was strangely silent. It wasn't until later, after the tears had slowed, that I broke the silence. "I don't even remember driving." My mother broke down again, wailing as though my words had shattered something inside her. My sister, her face pale, took my hand and whispered, "You weren't driving." I blinked. "Then who?" She looked away, her voice trembling. "Dad. H.He died. Last night." "No," I said, shaking my head. "Dad died last year." But the look on her face told me otherwise. I'd been asleep for 3 days, but it felt like I had lost a year. Since that day, everything has been a blur. Sometimes I wake up and discover something I believed was real, wasn't. I never got that promotion. I never published that story. Worst of all, the girlfriend I loved, never existed. But what does remain, etched into my soul, is the memory of the Midnight Man and that twisted smile, devouring me, piece by piece. And last night, in a dream, I saw my father. We were driving down a quiet country road, and when he turned to me, his eyes were no longer his own. He looked at me with the dead and whispered, "You need to wake up.